repeating myself. I did not record. So let me start again if you all don't mind. Clarise Nixon and Paul D. Nixon are siblings who together form CP Nix. The mission of CP Nix is to engage with thought leaders who are spiritually curious and who love to learn. They strive to make complex ideas more simple through inspiration, transformation, and innovation. Paul and Clarise have published articles and books, worked on podcasts, and produced a YouTube channel on a variety of topics, including forming an authentication relationship with God, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, critical thinking, racial reconciliation, and academic success on all levels. Their book series includes God is a Person, Discovering God for Yourself, an education edition for use in the classroom, and a new workbook designed to help people take practical steps to develop and maintain their relationship with God. All of their materials, as well as their booking information, can be found on their website, cpnix.com. And I have put that information also in the chat. So let's welcome Paul and Clarise. I really, from my heart to yours, as I said to you earlier, I just thank you for agreeing to be in this conversation. I have some questions for you, and I'm just going to ask you to answer those questions informally. And then we will have questions from our audience. So as I was reading the book, one of the things that struck me, and of course, we know that I have a background in creative writing, is the concept of God being a person. And what it did for me is that it helped me to create a narrative, or to hear the narrative, the story of God, which helped me to rethink my relationship with God. So I really want to thank you all for doing this work. I really thank you for doing this work. And so my question to you, the first question is, what inspired you to develop the book, God is a Person?
Wow. I have a lot to respond to. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having us. We are pleased to be here. Of course, I think everybody probably knows this already. I recognize all the faces on here, but Dr. Hyman, of course, one of the great mentors in my academic career and in my professional career as well. So I think you can take some responsibility for the work that we have done. Of course, and you taught Claire as well. I don't know if she would.
So let me interrupt you, because I was just
Mhm.
going to say, since you brought that up, I
Mhm.
think Dr. Hyman left my alma mater the year before I started.
Oh, did you?
I was
Yeah.
not taught by her. I'm
Okay.
still a little upset about it, but it's fine. But at least she's my colleague now, so you know.
Right. Well, I get the double benefit of being her student and then being her colleague. It's been incredible. So to answer I guess to start to answer the question, Claire, jump in at any time. This idea has kind of been floating around and bouncing around in my head for a while now. And early in my career, I used to say to my students, I bet if we thought of God as a person, we would treat him differently. Right? Because our perspective of God isn't always a perspective of who is this person. Our perspective is very often, I need a thing, let me go get it. Right? Whether it's comfort or whether it's blessings or whether it's healing for my family, whatever it is. And I'm not saying it's wrong to ask God for the stuff that we need. I think we should. I think that's appropriate, but it's a limiting relationship. It's a relationship in which you take and don't give. Right? So it's not a two-way relationship. So if you think of God as a person, this is what, again, early in my career, 20 years ago, I used to say that to my students. Think of God as a person. And obviously I didn't know I was going to write a book about it later, but it's kind of been bouncing around my head for a while. So I started writing some ideas as I was making presentations in different contexts. And it was, it had some legs, but it wasn't really coming together. And I said, I need some help with this. And I was like, who is the person that would actually um be beneficial to this work? And it was my sister, and it was kind of obviously my sister, right? It was like Claire's duh, like what am I even thinking about, right? It's obviously Claire. I called Claire, texted her, whatever it was, and I said, hey, I'm trying to put this book together. It's not really coming. Come on, just come help me out and let's work on it. And at that point, it was probably there are 7 chapters and there are two. There's an introduction and an epilogue, all of which is kind of very content specific. So at the point there might have been 2 or maybe 3 chapters that were already thought through by the time when she joined us, and then so the rest of the book she had to rethink what was there, and then we created the rest of it together. So that was kind of the beginning of the process. Just always kind of trying to think, what is God like? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like what is God really like? You know? I don't see Claire talking, but I want you to
So
say
I'm
something.
about I'm about
Okay,
to.
good.
So for me, it was a little different. I wasn't really introduced to the God as a person idea until Paul asked me to join him in writing this book. But before that, we had written many things together, and um, I knew years ago that Paul is. I kind of want to work with him all the time because we
Hmm.
always have fun. We're always laughing, and we're always doing something that is intellectually stimulating or creatively stimulating or something. Like, I think we just work really well together. And it's important for me personally that I have someone in my life that helps me think things through and helps me stretch in some way. And Paul is that one of those people for me. So when he asked me to join, it was really, I was like, yes. And also at the time, I was really looking for some kind of project to help feed me in some way because I was experiencing burnout. And I just needed something to help electroshock me back into existence. And so when he came up with this, I was like, absolutely yes. And writing is something that I've always done. I feel like when I was a kid, I kind of had in the back of my mind, like the far, far, far back of my mind, that I might want to publish something one day, but not for real. It's nothing I'd ever really worked toward, and not seriously anyway. And it wasn't until we started writing on this book together that I started to remember, oh, this is something that childhood Claire actually used to think about. And it just kind of helped again electroshock me back into existence. And also Paul and I love a lot of the same things.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not going to name them all, but one of the things we do love to do, we're both very spiritually curious people.
Hmm.
And so when you are searching together, when you're writing together, when the Holy Spirit is aligned, like he aligns both of you together, it really
Hmm.
makes the work not only personally beneficial, but I think it also leads to other things, like, for example, a company that we created, which we weren't thinking about when we started writing this book. At least I wasn't. I don't know if Paul was,
Nope, not at all.
but it kind of just started to breathe and get tentacles into other areas, and it just kind of kept growing and growing. And so, obviously, I'm happy that I said yes, and Paul was smart to ask me to do this with him.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add to that. When it came sort of closer to um working on this work specifically, because like I said, it's kind of an old idea in some ways. I was kind of noticing that 'cause I have interactions with a lot of people that are not of the same denomination as I am, but they're believers and they're Christians and they're spiritually curious and they're sincere and all those kinds of things. And I would just kind of started to take notice of the nature of our interaction. So they would ask me, for example, and I don't want to get too specific here, but they would ask me questions about like my denomination, right? What's the difference between your denomination and mine? And my response was almost always a difference, not a similarity. They would say, like,
Hmm.
what does it mean to be your thing? And I would say, we don't, right? We don't believe this, we believe that. We do this instead of that. And then I started to just kind of rethink it. Is that really what it means to be a member of this denomination? If that's true, then that's unfortunate. But also, I don't think that's really true. I don't think that's really the difference between one denomination and the other. Or let me say that differently. I don't think I don't think that difference is the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing is not the thing that divides us, it's the thing that unites us. Right. So why is it that I'm approaching my own Christianity from a don't perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Right? From a not perspective. Why am I approaching my own Christianity from a perspective of what I'm not going to do? And I don't think what we're not going to do is the thing that's most important.
And I think the things that we're not going to do, if we focus on that, we make those things the priority, at least in my experience, it doesn't draw me closer to God at all.
Right.
It really just stresses me out. That's what it does. It doesn't help me enjoy a relationship with God. It doesn't help me enjoy the religion I'm a part of. It just makes me focus on the stuff I can't do and how I feel like it's a burden
Mm-hmm.
to be different because
Right.
that's what God told me to do. But no, it's not. I mean, there's gonna be difference between people who follow God and people who don't. Like that's just gonna naturally happen. But I think just like Paul is saying, I think when we make those differences the focal point, we're doing a disservice to God. I don't even want to say to the religion. We're doing a disservice to God and who he is and what he wants of us and what he asks of us.
It's like with any relationship, and this is turning into a really long answer to this question, but it's like with any
I like this
relationship.
teasing.
Yeah,
You're
right.
teasing it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like with any relationship. You can't be a good member of that relationship from a don't perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, I'm not gonna cheat on my wife. Does that make me a good husband? And which one is my goal? Is my goal just to be faithful, or is my goal to be a good husband?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is my goal to not be abusive, or is
Right.
my goal to be nurturing? And they're
Mm-hmm.
very different. I can not beat my wife and still be a terrible husband.
Right.
Right? It's not just a matter of did I put my hands on her. That's not what we're focusing on. So in the same way with God, is it just I'm not gonna do these things, or is it I'm gonna actively try to do these things? And so that's kind of our starting point in some ways. Um, and the cool thing about working with Claire, like she said, is we're very, very similar. Obviously, we're siblings, but we have a lot of things that we like that are similar, and we think very similarly, but we also think very differently in some very key ways. And she really stretches me, and I think I stretch her in some of the ways that we think differently. So I tend to be more extemporaneous, right? Like I'll accept a speaking engagement in a minute and be like, it's in 3 days. All right, let's go. Let's make it happen. And she'll be like, 3 days? That is not nearly enough time.
And also, what is this thing you just cited?
Yeah,
No details. I don't know what
what's
this
the
is.
format and all this kind of stuff? I'm like, let's go. Let's just go.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a cool thing, working together, kind of going into the second question there. But yeah.
So yes, you are going into the second question, which let's go into the second question. I really appreciate you all answering the first answer. That's very, very helpful. And I really the whole concept of approaching God not in the framework of not. Oh boy, thank both of you all for that. I appreciate that. Which brings us to the next question in terms of your creative process in developing the book, because of course we don't have one author, and I'm using the word don't, not. So scratch that word.
Not as,
Okay,
but not as appropriate though. It's just not ultimate.
okay, we have two authors. So as I was thinking about it, because I'm always thinking about voices, I said we have two authors that have to come together to create one voice. So that's what for me, that's what you all did. And so we have Claire, and then we have Paul, and then of course you all have many voices, and then within that you're creating one voice. So my question is, what was your process when two people coming together? And Claire seems to be very organized, I take it, and Paul is more intuitive. So
Mhm.
that too,
That's a good way of saying that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, too. What happened in terms of the two coming together in terms of that one voice?
I feel like I want to say two things.
Mhm.
One thing I want to say is about our writing process. Another thing I want to say is about our different voices in the book. So
Mhm.
our writing process remains still is that we have a standing meeting every Sunday that I'm sure we've canceled it before, but very few things make us cancel this thing. Like we have to come and meet together for at least 1 or 2 hours. every Sunday to work on whatever it is that we're working on.
We should say once a week because it's not always Sunday. It's Sunday
Okay,
right
once
now,
a week.
but
And
it
sometimes,
hasn't always been Sunday, but it's Sunday right now.
and actually, sometimes it's more than once a week because we've met last week, like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, we got 2 meetings coming this
Because
week
there's
too.
a bunch of things happening, but at least once a week, we come and meet and we work on whatever it is that we're working on. We use Google Docs because Google Docs lets people collaborate on the same document at the same time. So sometimes during a writing session, I'll be in one section writing something and Paul will be in a completely different section writing something. Sometimes during a writing session, we're both working on the same section. It really just kind of depends, but we're always in the same document at the same time. We always start with some kind of brainstorming lining plan for whether we're doing an article or a book. We use what's called the logic of, which is something that we got from a organization called the Critical Thinking
Foundation Critical Thinking.
Thank you, Foundation Critical Thinking, that we use in our teaching as well. And we found it very useful to use in our writing projects together, which essentially what it does is it helps us think through the logic of whatever we're trying to create. And when we start that way, it really helps open up our minds to create. And then we just write until we're done writing. I mean, I feel like this book took about a year, maybe.
Probably 2.
Or less than a
Probably
year.
2.
You
Maybe
think?
maybe
That
maybe it
sounds
was a
long.
year and a half. I don't remember actually. Maybe 1.
I think it was
Possibly.
1. But when you're consistent, it's the consistency that gets the work done. Because once a week for 1 to 2 hours is not a lot of time in a week. But when you do that every single week for a year or more, at some point you will have created something. And so that's really it's the consistency for us that helped us get through it. In terms of our voices, I feel like we have a cheat code between us because we talk a lot alike. I mean, even our students always say to us, my students say to me all the time, your mannerisms are exactly like your brother. I hear your brother when you're teaching. So I feel like our voices sound the same anyway. That part was easy. And there are some parts of the book when I look back at it, I can't remember who wrote it because we sound the same anyway. So I feel like we have a cheat code with that particular part.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, like I mentioned, I started the book on my own and added Claire to it. But even the chapters that I began before her, I look back on them, and what Claire just said is true for those too. I don't remember who wrote what. And besides the part, because in the book we tell personal stories, besides the part where I say, when Paul, did this and this, and I'm telling a story that happened to me, and Claire does the same thing. When Clarice, blah, blah, blah. Besides those parts, we really don't know who wrote what. There's really no way for even us to tell. And I think that's partially because of the process that Claire was describing, because what we'll do is we'll write different parts or we'll write the same thing. But like, let's just say I'm writing one section and she's writing another section. When I'm done with my section, I go behind her and look at her section. And she goes behind me to look at my section. And we don't discuss it. We just change it.
Yeah.
If something needs to be different, we just change it. So that's one of the cool things about I guess the level of maybe trust we have in each other. Is that the right word? Or maybe
I think
just
alignment too. I think we're very aligned.
Yeah. So I don't need Claire's permission to change her sentence and vice versa.
Wow.
Right. So we don't ask permission. This is our document. It needs to be different. Just change it. And then if there's a question, I'll ask the question. Why did you do this way? And she'd be like this and this, and then I'm like, well, I'm thinking this and that. And she'd be like, okay, change it. You know what I mean? So it's like there's no kind of ego or anything like that. It's not like, it's pretty easy from that perspective. You can probably hear some of the parts of our process that are probably more Claire inspired and some that are more Paul inspired. The idea of meeting at a set time every single week, that's got Claire written all over it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like we have a meeting on Sundays, 10 a.m. Okay, that's Claire. Because for me, I'll look on Friday, I'll see what I have on Sunday and be like, hey, what time can you meet on Sunday? And Claire's like, no, we need to know. I need to know in 3 weeks what time we're meeting on Sunday.
There's so much stuff in my schedule that if you're not in there 2 weeks before, I'm feeling it. So if you want my time, you have to, make it clear that you want my time weeks in advance.
Yeah. And then the actual process of writing is a little, I think it's a little bit more me inspired, where we're both just kind of in there, we're just kind of doing stuff. And then at the end, we'll look at the whole thing. Is this doing what we want it to do? And we'll look again at our brainstorming document, our logic of, and say, did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish? Is it what we're really trying to do? You know. And actually, we had a session last week, maybe the week before, where we were doing this. We're working on a new article, and we're thinking it through. And in thinking it through, the article turned into a much bigger idea. So now we got another book that we're working on.
Hmm.
Another follow-up to this, so because this idea is very much unexplored, right? We're just tip of the iceberg. God, like, what kind of person is God? We could write about that the rest of our lives. You know what I mean? So this book is just like it's a drop in the bucket. So we have more sort of ideas that we're developing along this same line that came out of the process, came out of just continuing to think this through week after week. For now, it's been 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, where every week we're thinking about the same thing. So then we have momentum too. That's the other thing. A great deal of momentum, you know. Um, so yeah.
The writing session that Paul's talking about, we actually accidentally, and we both started laughing because it was funny. We wound up accidentally outlining the next book.
Right.
And
Hmm.
like we started the session to work on an article. An article, by the way, that we'd been trying to write for months at this point.
Months. Yeah.
We're finally starting to do it. We sit down to do it and then wind up doing something completely different just based on the way that I think it's because it's such an unexplored area and because God is who he is, just like Paul's saying, we could talk about him all the time. And because we're spiritually curious, we're learning something new about him every single day. So our content is never going to, it's literally never going to run out. And so whenever we're inspired, we just try to write stuff down because our memories are terrible. We try to write
Right.
stuff down, get
Right.
it down somewhere. Even if it's something we have to return to at a later date, at least we've written it down and we can return to it at a later date.
Nice. Nice. I have another question about this process. If I can just throw that one in.
Hmm.
The section for the educator specifically, in terms of what was the thought behind developing those practical questions that can be used in the classroom. What was your thinking behind that? That's a nice feature, actually.
Well, it started with the first edition of the book. We wanted to be very careful to not leave readers thinking, "What do I do now?" Right? We didn't want you to finish a chapter thinking, "Oh, that was nice. Now what?" Instead, we wanted to give people some ideas of now what. So we included what we call practical steps. Well, the idea of practical steps just kind of took on a life of its own, you know. And so then it's practical steps for a person in the original book, practical steps for a person just trying to get closer to God. But we can actually leverage this content and use it in our classrooms. So what about activities and assignments that are kind of an extension of the practical steps idea? And we use critical thinking questions and literary analysis questions and essay writing, like those, normal English classroom questions, with just using this content. So read this chapter. Here's 7 questions. Choose one and do a project on it. That kind of thing. So it kind of started with the one of the main components of the original book, and then it kind of grew to the point where we need to publish another edition of the book, an education edition, just specifically for use in the classroom. Um, so that's kind of where that started.
Yeah,
I
that was
think,
a
I mean, obviously, since Paul and I are both English educators, that's also very helpful. And also, our institutions both use the same critical thinking framework in our English classrooms. And so, again, just the alignment and the synergy that Paul and I have um, really just paves the way for the kind of content that we're able to create.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. Really appreciated that. Which moves us to the next question in terms of your publishing process. We have people who will be watching this and who are with us now, and they may be in the midst of publishing a book or writing a book or have a desire to write and publish a book. So it's one thing to write, it's another thing to publish. So what's that publishing process for you?
For us, it goes back to some of our original goals. our original goals really revolved around fidelity to the content. So we wanted to make sure, just put it bluntly, we wanted to have the last word on what appeared on the page. And we knew from experience, because we work in editing, we've done that for a while, and we know people that have published books and stuff. We knew from experience that when you contract your book with a publisher, they actually have the final say over what appears on the page. You don't. Your name is on the page, but if they change some words and you don't like it, tough. It's up to them. And we were not comfortable with that outcome. We didn't want to have to yield that right.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to give that up. So we said we're going to self-publish. We want to publish ourselves, and let's go find a company that helps independent authors self-publish. So that's what we did. And we have a friend who went through a process that she enjoyed, and we reached out to the company that she used, and we had some good conversations, and we liked what they had to say. So we're like, let's give them a try. So that's kind of where we ended up. So we chose self-publishing because we wanted final say, like I said, and we thought the company did a good job of, giving us a professional feel, give us a book that has got the weight to it. Sometimes we don't want our book to be a pamphlet. Right. We don't want it to feel like it was printed on somebody's copy machine. This needs to be a book, right? It's got to have some weight to it. It's got to have, we need a nice strong spine on it. We want clear graphics, all that kind of stuff. So that was part of it too. We wanted a quality product that we have the final say on. And it actually, in our process, I probably shouldn't. I'm going to say this because I didn't identify the publisher. One of the products that was offered in the package that we paid for was editing. So we had our book edited by their in-house editors, and we took a look at the copy after it was edited. We were like, never mind, we'll edit it ourselves. We got it. We got it. So we took over editing of our own book. Yeah, took over editing of our own book because they made some changes that were not appropriate. They just weren't right. It was like, that's not.
Which has pros and cons. So since we're being transparent, I saw something. I don't even want to say this. I saw something, Paul, in the book earlier today, and I was like,
uh-oh.
So there's pros and cons to being your own editor. And if anyone is ever thinking of doing that, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to print out your document and edit the hard copy. Do not edit a PDF. Do not edit on a screen. You need a pen in your hand and paper in your hand when you're going through and editing your own work. Absolutely, for sure. And even I would say you might want to read it aloud to yourself, particularly if you're not comfortable writing. Read it aloud to yourself, listen to what it actually sounds like. Or if you have a really good friend, even have them read it aloud to you so you can hear it. And then you'll be able to make a lot of other adjustments that you either would have missed or wouldn't have thought of if you were just looking at a screen and silently reading something in your head. Just a big piece of advice I want to give people if you're thinking about doing that.
Boy, that's good.
The advice I want to give about being your own editor is don't. It's a bad idea. No, it is. It's a bad idea. It really is. It's a bad idea. Find an editor that is going to do a good job and pay him.
Yeah.
Claire and I have done so much editing that we felt like we could edit our own book, and we did it, but
we could have
got somebody else to edit it. We probably should have. I mean, the other thing, this, those of you who are writers, of course, this. Once you write something, when you read it, you're going to remember what you were trying to say instead of seeing what you wrote down, which is very different. So if somebody else is reading it, they have no idea what you're trying to say. They're going to see the words that are there and be like, there should be a comma here, and fix it. Whereas in your head, you're reading it and be like, I hear the comma, I don't see the comma, but I don't even notice that I don't see the comma because I hear it. So I missed the comma. You know what I mean? So it's really, really beneficial to have somebody else edit your work if yeah.
And we brought someone else in. We had someone read it.
That's true. A couple of people.
And yeah, actually a few. Now that I'm thinking about it, we had a few people read it. So we
weren't really editors. They weren't really editors though. They were looking at content. They weren't looking at structure and style.
But content's important. Content's important when you're editing. You know what I'm saying? It's a part of it. So, it wasn't just the two of us. This was definitely, we had several people along the way who gave us advice, and very useful.
Yeah.
Advice.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Nice. Which leads us to the next. Now we want to hear those excerpts from the book that you want to share with us. In terms of, when we all go to the bookstore, we ask that intuitive question, boy, why do I just need to have this book? Or for me, it's like, why should I give my two nieces, God is a person, but they're Christmas gifts, one of their Christmas gifts. Yes, they need this book, actually. They really do. So why? So if you all can just share excerpts from the book.
You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
One of the chapters, actually the first chapter in the book is called The Essence of God. And in this chapter, actually, I should probably talk about the introduction first. How much information do I need to give? So in the first part, we talk about this idea of having love glasses, which basically means there's a particular lens when you're looking for God. There's a particular lens that you should use so that you don't distort his image. And that lens is love. So we use the metaphor of having glasses on your face. Glasses are supposed to help you see more clearly. So putting love glasses on when you're looking for God is an idea that means every attribute that you find out about him, every characteristic, look at that through the lens of love, and you'll have a clearer picture of who God is. So in chapter 1, we have the title is called The Essence of God, and it's talking about God's different omnis. So he's omnipresent, he's omniscient, he's omnipotent, all those different things. And there's a section that I'll read where we're talking about God's loving infinitude. And it says, we have God's full attention all the time. God is completely present to all of our moments, which is very different from our interactions with other people. Sometimes at the end of a long day, you might be listening to your spouse or friend, and you're having a hard time paying attention because you're so tired or distracted. One of you thinks you're having a good conversation, and the next thing you know, the other one is asleep. This happens because we do not have unlimited attention, but God does. God's infinitude means that he has unlimited attention, and he spends all of it on each of us all the time. Becoming less and less realistic for a person to expect to be able to have someone else's undivided attention for an extended period of time. There's so much going on, and we give our full attention to so few things, but God's attention never wavers. James 5:13 and 14 says, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. Prayer is a conversation with God, and he wants to talk to us all the time, no matter what we have going on in our lives. God's omnipresence means he is always ready for us to come to him. He is always waiting to hear from us, and we have his full attention all of the time. I chose that excerpt because it's one of the things that I feel like still speaks to me, which, by the way, is a little strange for me. It's strange for me to have written something with Paul, but it still speaks to me, even though I'm the person that wrote it. It still encourages me. It still helps me learn. And that particular excerpt, just the idea that I have all of God's attention all of the time, is so encouraging to me, because there are times where I felt very isolated and felt very alone, but that wasn't God not being with me. That was actually me not being with God, because God is always present and I always have all of his attention. As long as I'm tapping into him, I don't ever have to feel isolated or alone. So that idea has just been very helpful for me.
I like that.
So to help answer Dr. Hammond's question more directly, one of the things that I think this book does, or at least something we attempt to do, is just kind of think about it again, right? Just reconsider whatever the thing is. So in this case, I'm gonna read a short excerpt from the same chapter. In this case, we're reimagining what it means that God is love. We all know God is love. Everybody who's been in a Christian church, God is love. That's one of the most common statements we have about God, and it's absolutely true. but we don't always know what that really means. And even if we do know what it means, there's still more to it than that because it's God and it's not us, right? So even if you have a clear idea of what it means that God is love, there's still more to it. There's still more to discover. So what we're trying to do, what we attempt to do in this book right here, God is a, I can't really, there it is. What we're trying to do, one of the things we attempt to do, why you should buy it for your nieces. We're just trying to just think about it again. Just reconsider the thing that you already know from a different perspective. So this on the excerpt Claire just read and the thing that I just read is once again just an attempt, just an effort to reconsider this idea. Like we know the omnis, right? We know he's omniscient, we know he's omnipresent, we know he's omnipotent. But how does that manifest itself? How does that play out in our lives? What does that actually mean? Right. So I want to read a short excerpt from the next it's actually the next paragraph from where she ended. I didn't know she was gonna pick that.
Oh,
But this is
because
this
I
is how
like
we
it. You see
this
the
is how
Y'all
we
are
it
in
was aligned.
alignment.
It's aligned, yeah. So the next section is on God's omnipotence, and this is how we end the chapter. And I'll just read a couple of, let me see. I'm gonna read two paragraphs. I'm gonna skip one. I'm gonna read one more paragraph. Okay, here we go. Maybe the most fun omni to imagine is God's omnipotence, which means God has all power and all ability. In this age of superhero shows and movies, it's fun to think of God flying around, deflecting bullets, walking through walls. Without our love glasses, it can be very easy to reduce God to a comic book character. But comic book characters are flawed, so thinking of God in this way distorts who he is. Not only is God's omnipotence fun to imagine, it can also be confusing, not because we don't believe it to be true, but because we do believe it to be true. God's omnipotence is the attribute that people most readily accept of God. The most common and the most easily accepted image of God is an image of power. I'm going to skip a paragraph, but it's going to continue. But God, the true God, is the God of supreme ultimate power. But he is not made in our image. We are made in his image. We make the mistake of assuming that because God is all powerful, it means that he should use his power the way we would use it if we were all powerful. When he doesn't use his power in this way, we sometimes call him corrupt or even evil. When we witness atrocities every day in our world and in our personal lives, we conclude that God cannot be all good and all powerful at the same time. We use the scientific method instead of the super-rational method when we observe, then report. One more. If God is both good and powerful, then why does he let small children endure abuse? If God is both good and powerful, then why does he allow women to be beaten by their husbands? If God is both good and powerful, then why is there so much social injustice in the world? It seems like God either doesn't care about all the suffering or he can't stop it. The problem with this image of God is that it is inherently selfish. It's not really about God, it's about us. We have this picture of a God who will beat up all of our enemies, who will repay the bullies who treated us bad when we were in high school, who will make fools of the people who made fun of us. God will fight our battles, and God will fight our battles, and he will destroy sin, but he will do it using his own methods and in his own time. So I'm gonna stop there. So the idea, once again, God is omnipotent, right? But we tend to think that God should act the way we would act if we were omnipotent, right? And one of the things that helped motivate this thought is from a movie. I'm a huge, we're both huge, massive film buffs. There's a movie called um, which one was it? Batman v Superman. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a DC movie, and in the movie, Batman and Superman end up fighting. So Batman is like, Superman shouldn't be. He's all powerful. He's too strong. Whatever. He shouldn't be. Whatever. And of course, the villain in the movie is Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor actually has a conversation with Superman on the top of a building, and he says one of the things that we just said in the book. He says, if God is all good, he can't be all powerful. And if he's all powerful, he can't be all good. This is a statement he makes. And I was taken aback by it. And of course, we've had these conversations. And a lot of people think that way. A lot of people think it's one or the other. You can't be both. But that's not looking at it from the lens of love glasses. And one of the things that love glasses teaches us is that love has to be voluntary. Love must be voluntary. In other words, if I'm gonna love you, I have to let you be free to not love me back. If I force you to love me back, that's not an act of love. Love has to be voluntary, right? So if God is love, if God is gonna allow, God has to allow choice if he is who he says he is, which means some people are gonna make the wrong choice. So to prevent every possible evil interaction, you're not
Is not
you're,
loving.
yeah, that's not loving. You're not who you said you see what I'm saying? So I mean it's a little complicated. We talk about it more in the book, but just this idea that just trying to refute the idea that God cannot be both good and loving at the same time. Good and powerful, excuse me. Good and powerful at the same time. So that's kind of why why I wanted to read that excerpt, because again it's kind of a growing um idea, and maybe it's not growing, maybe I'm just becoming more aware of it, but we have so much of our entertainment, television and film, is on vigilante justice, people who are deliberately not part of the existing system because the system is corrupt, so they got to go do justice another way, right? So then we're growing less and less trusting of the system, which I'm not saying that's the wrong thing. I'm just saying vigilante justice, that's not how God does things. God's not a vigilante. God's not like Batman. He's not. Or like Superman. Neither one. So, just ideas. We're just throwing around. This is why your niece needs the book. Just throwing around ideas. Just trying to explore ideas.
Yeah.
And I appreciate another
sorry.
thing that Paul and I do in the book, because we are just throwing around ideas. And we say in the introduction that we're just curious and here's some ideas we have.
Yeah.
We actually say that. But another thing that we do in each chapter is we do point to the Bible, because the Bible is one long story about God's relationship with his people. And if it's true that the Bible reveals God, then we can find him in the Bible. And so the Bible had to be and has to be what grounds our content, really. It has to be connected to that. So yes, we have ideas, but we're not just, randomly throwing stuff out there. Like we're researching, we're reading. And while we're not theologians, we also wanted to make it clear that you don't have to be a theologian to get to know God or to read the Bible. So I'm actually glad we're not theologians, because we're proof that you can just be a regular person and still read a complicated book and still understand a complex entity. It's possible.
Nice. Can you, because we want to get the audience in, give us an excerpt from those comprehension questions in terms of how maybe possibly to use one of those?
Okay. I actually don't have an education edition with me.
I was just about to say, do you have an education edition with you?
I don't. Hold on. I have it on the computer.
Okay, I was going to say, I have my education.
Okay, beautiful.
You pick a question.
Okay, so since you all read from chapter 1, I will let me see. Oh, okay. I like this one here. 4, how can self-love be other-centered?
You want us to answer that question, or what's
just in terms of you don't have to answer it, but what caused you to come up with that question in this section?
I think I remember, so I'm going to try and answer this. So self-love is like a really hot term right now. People are talking about it all the time. But for the Christian, I believe that self-love falls short of ultimate love. If God is the source of all love, then even self-love should be through God. In other words, I should learn how to love myself through my relationship with God. He literally created me, and so he's going to know how I'm best taken care of. And so I've been in counseling for several years now, and I go to a faith-based counselor. And I did that purposefully. And one of the things that I've discovered um, through working with her is that ultimately the best kind of self-care is Christ-centered self-care or Christ-centered self-love. I think we miss the mark when we think or say or believe that we ourselves are the ultimate and most powerful source of love. I think we have great capacity for love, but I can't love like God loves. I literally can't do it. Now he can love, I can love people like God loves through him, but I can't just do it on my own. Like I need help. Because I have people in my mind right now who I'm thinking about, like, I don't want to love that person. And sometimes I don't want to love myself either. Like there are
Right.
parts of myself that I don't want to love either. And so like, how do I, it's complicated sometimes to figure out, how do I love myself? How do I take care of myself without guilt, without shame, without feeling like I'm letting somebody down? How do I do that on my own? Well, I don't do it on my own. I do it through Christ instead. And because Christ is a community-centered person, self-love is never just myself. It always includes somebody else. I can get out of a state of sadness by helping somebody with something, which seems a little oxymoronic.
Yeah.
But helping someone else with something, so not focusing on myself at all, helping someone else with something can actually make me feel really good and give me those hormonal and chemical happiness releases. But I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have just thought, go take a bath, go light some candles, go read a book, we'll be quiet for a little while, go to bed, get some rest, which are all important, drink some water, which are all important. You should do those things. But also there's a person over there that needs something that you can give them naturally. And the bath and the candles and all those other things don't give me the kind of endorphins that does. That does something else. And to me, those kinds of ideas are directly from God. I would never have thought to do that just on my own, of my own volition.
Nice. Boy. Okay, you all just need to come and just visit all the classes all over the world. So now what we're going to do is just go over to Mrs. Harp. We have some questions in the chat, and Ms. Harp will lead out.
Okay, I have enjoyed you all immensely. And let me just start off with the first question. And that is, you're both teachers, not theologians. What made you write a theological book? I'm thinking of concepts like the divine nature, the spiritual aspect of human nature, the judgment of God, and the like. And you sort of touched on it, Clarice, when you said earlier that we are not theologians, but we are educators. So if you want to elaborate a little bit more, or
I feel like, so we have a dad who's a minister. So
yes,
we kind of grew up, even though we're not ministers or theologians, we grew up in a home where that was around us all the time. So I think it was a little natural for us, and Paul, you could jump in, but I think it was a little natural for us when we talk about God, for us to have theological aspects of what we're talking about, although we actually tried not to do that because we wanted the book to reach a particular audience. And so I remember even during our editing stage, there were some words that we were taking out. So there were some things we were taking out because it just sounded way too churchy. And I was like, we're going to lose our audience if we say this. So, but that does say that our first draft had that stuff in there because I think it's just kind of part of the home that we grew up in, maybe, and the influences that we had around us. But we tried to change some of that as not to, I don't want to, I guess, discourage people from reading. I don't know if discourage is the right word.
I think that is a good word. And I think to sort of piggyback on that idea, we're aware that the Christian church doesn't always have a good reputation, right? Among both Christians and non-Christians. And there's a lot of people that we know personally who have experienced a good deal of, church hurt, right? And they no longer associate themselves with any particular church or denomination or even Christianity because of their personal experience.
Mhm.
So we wanted to very deliberately not involve a particular church in our exploration of who God is, partially to not alienate the audience, but also partially because God isn't bound by a church.
Mhm. Mhm.
God's not limited to church. God is
That's right.
God.
Mhm.
God can do whatever he wants. Right. So who is this person? Not very deliberately, not who do these people think this person is? No.
Mhm.
Who is he telling us he is? Right?
Mhm.
Who is God telling us he is? So we made it a point to try to, and hopefully we were somewhat successful, we made it a point to try to de-church it in terms of language, in terms of approach, in terms of even resources that we use. Just de-church it. There's a lot of science in there. There's a lot of stuff that's just straight science. And we quote liberally from a couple of scientists who are atheists, but they make our point, because our point is God set this thing up. So these people don't believe in God, but look, it's still true. You know what I mean? So I think the not being a theologian thing was um maybe even necessary for that sort of approach to take place, for us to be able to think about it non theologically in some ways. Go ahead.
Yes.
What did you say? Go ahead.
I was just saying what you were saying.
Say what?
I was saying what you were saying.
Oh, yeah. Theologically, yeah. So in terms of what made us right in this way, I think it's because again, from our experience, right? So, and then I think we also have some church hurt. We won't go into that here, but you know, there are times when we have been mistreated in one way or another from the church, and we sort of recognize, and I think this part of this is probably from our upbringing. We recognize that the church is made up of human beings who are all flawed, right? So just because a person belongs to the church and then they do something wrong, that doesn't make it the church's fault.
Mhm.
So we want to sort of absolve the church from that responsibility of the people doing it wrong.
Mhm.
So that's kind of part of it too, I think. Try to make spiritual concepts simple and approachable and readable. Like, you don't have to go to the pastor to understand what the Bible is saying.
Mhm.
You just,
Mhm.
you can really do it yourself. Just pick
Nice.
it up, So those are some of the ideas.
Okay. And so the next question is, you talked about editing your book and then the other editors, if you chose to use another editor. The question is, have you found editors who are willing to give the writers the final edit? Have you found editors who are willing to give the writers the final edit?
I think the fact that we didn't go company for this, we went to individual, like
Mhm.
freelancers. A freelancer is just going to do what you ask them to
Mhm.
do.
That's correct.
And all we wanted them to do was what we told them to do. So I feel like yes, we did find editors who were not connected to any other kind of entity. It was just themselves. They enjoyed doing the work.
Mhm.
And so they didn't have any skin in making it sound the way their boss wanted it to sound.
Mhm.
That really exist in our editing experience.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah. So just kind of answer that question. Looking for an editor to give you final say, I would say probably lean towards a freelance editor instead of a company editor,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't have a brand, they
Right.
don't have a sound, whatever. They're gonna fix your content and move on. So
Got you. Got you. When you talked about the Batman illustration, uh, someone said beautiful. And when you were referencing the love of God, someone said beautiful. God is committed to ultimate love and ultimate freedom. He invites us to love, but never forces. So they really got your concept. And I just wanted to throw that out there. It's not a question, just a statement. And I just wanted to reiterate that. The last question is, have you both been involved in Adventist education for your entire career? And do you intend to incorporate your book into your course curricula?
For me, the answer to the first question is no. I do have some education experience outside of any particular church. And the second question, the answer is yes. And I actually do use this book, the education edition, in 3 of my classes that I teach right now. Freshman Comp 1 and 2, and then I also teach a course called Biblical Literature, which is a course in which it's exactly what it sounds like. We look at the Bible as a piece of literature, and we use literary analysis techniques to dig into what the Bible is saying. So I use this book for those 3 courses even now.
My answer is opposite. Yes, all my career as an educator has been in Adventism. And well, the second, yes and no. So I don't use the entire book in my classes, but I do use chapters in my classes. There's a particular chapter, chapter 7, called The Protagonist Problem, that works really, really, really well in a couple of classes that I teach. And so I do use a chapter in that book in my course curricula.
Yeah, with that in mind, this is the last thing I'll say. With that in mind, Claire mentioned something earlier that I want to kind of reiterate. It's interesting how, we wrote the book, but as we go through it, and again, we're developing new materials and stuff, and kind of looking back on the original document to help springboard us into these new ideas. There's a lot of stuff in here that we don't even really know yet. You know what I mean? Like, we wrote it, but we don't really know it. It's just like, we have activities in here that we look at it, we're like, oh, I should do that. It's like stuff that it works, and we've tried it, but it's not like we're consistently even the people that are represented in the book. So I mean, there's so much room, in my opinion, for just kind of growth into this idea that I find it useful in class, because it really is just a jumping off point to just have more conversation and to just think even more fully through this idea that we will never understand completely. Even with perfect minds, we'll never fully understand who God is, because he's so much bigger than we are. So, I think it's valuable to just keep considering it, keep thinking about it, just think about it again, think about it differently. So that's kind of the goal.
Okay. Those were all the questions I have.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Sister Hart. And then as we get to 6:59, I really want to thank you, Paul and Clarise, for just sharing with us this book. I'm telling you, it is so valuable. As I was thinking about the book as we were going through it, and I know you all are film buffs, I said, boy, what if we had a movie from this called God is a Person? Yeah, that's a movie idea for you too. So, just take a note out of that book, Eat, Pray, Love, how they turned that into a movie project. This is that can continue to grow. And so I want to thank you. And then I want to thank everyone who joined the conversation this evening. This has been a very thoughtful and a very deep conversation. If you have some friends who missed it, this will be on YouTube by tomorrow morning. And I just going to ask that you would share it with as many friends as possible, and also like the channel. Because again, our commitment is to make sure that we affirm writers, that we affirm the books that they are working on specifically. And just, we're so thankful for Creative Genius. And so, folks, I thank you again. And if I don't see everyone again, I just say have a blessed holiday and a Merry Christmas. God bless and good evening.
God bless everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.